So if we're good on the Ali image description thing for now, and that gives us an actionable item from that, so this is perfect. So
Yeah.
this is literally why we have this show, is to have actionable things that people need so that we can all move forward together. So I'm going to show a bit of what I did this week, which is nothing at all, other than make WordPress and Drupal better. Now, I know what you're saying, Brian, you don't believe in WordPress. Well, that's right. But like Santa Claus, I keep this propagated, right? That WordPress is a good platform and we should keep using it. So I have a repo called Hacks All the Things. It's a test bed for all the integrations that Hacks has into other platforms. And when you fire it up in DDev, you just get like these basic links. So I use this to test how Hacks is running in all these platforms. The focus of the last week has been largely on Drupal 8, and soon I'll be able to write Drupal 8/9 because this actually will work in Drupal 9 the day it's released, which I think is in a week. But so the big deal in tweaking the integrations that I did this week has to do with media, the media side of things. So in Drupal, you have a module called the media module. It lets you have this thing that took forever to get into core, and I will not go and debate why, but forever, Drupal didn't have any way of managing media, which is insane. But in WordPress, we had our dashboard, and then you'd go to media. It's a core piece of this system, right? And you just have this listing of items, and I would select one, and I could change the caption, title. It's just kind of a central database dedicated to media, right? Both these platforms have it. It's pretty common in all CMSs at this point. So what I did with the Hacks integration that hopefully is a big deal for when people go to adopt this. If I go to privacy policy in here, right? So this is what it looks like when you've Hacksified your WordPress site. So we've got Hacks over here. It's also doing some custom stuff to specifically take up the exact area of the side column in your WordPress site, which was very annoying. It was very annoying to do, but okay, so I've got my content here. Basically is hijacking the way that like TinyMC would work. So I can delete that heading, save, whatever, right? I'm just proving that that works. Okay, so the big deal in what I added this week is when I do search, I can now do WordPress media, and this is returning from my WordPress site the media that's behind the scenes, right? That's in that page. So it's not just some files on the file system, it's actually WordPress's media types. So I can say, hey, make that 2-column. We can go to search, pull this over, and just drag and drop that ELMS leaf in. And now we've got that, but as powered by WordPress's media system. So then the other piece of this is being able to hit upload, finding a picture of this bird on my back porch, and going the opposite direction. So what just happened there is I selected that image for upload, it bridged the upload, chucked it into what it considers the URL, then inserted it into the page. So now I have an IMG tag here, but behind the scenes, I also now have the bird as a dedicated media type that came across. And so now I'll be able to update the title, bird on the porch, and I have a caption, this is a cardinal on my back porch, stuff like that, right? Give it alt text, all that good stuff. So as another just wonder of like, hey, WordPress is so usable, it just saved. There are literally no other interfaces in WordPress I can find that auto-save what you're doing, but this one that's in core just auto-saved. It took me a long time to be like, where's the save button to click? I don't want to just hit it. But so now that I've updated that description.
We need Cindy Flegel here.
And now when I search on this side, I think I can search for cardinal. Yes, now I can search for cardinal because it appears in that text below, and I see bird on the porch in my search results. So I can drop the bird on the porch into there, and then convert the bird to a meme, and we'll say, okay, just something non-trolly, absolutely, very professional. So we save, and we've got the my birds here. So We have deep media integration into WordPress. And the reason that I needed to do that is because it couldn't just be Drupal that has the good media integration. So the exact same thing happens with Drupal now. You can either add media via the internal media system or go to a piece of content, go into block editor mode, and move that over there. And now search. Now Drupal's a little weird because of the way that its media system operates. It actually has 5 different types of media as dedicated endpoints, whereas WordPress's API serves up all the media. So it's kind of nice that WordPress does that. I could, obviously I could make one that does this, but I don't want to get that far in the weeds until someone actually has a need for it. But so I can search Drupal's images, right, and pull up this horrific photo of me, and then it's in context. The fun thing, and where that photo came from actually, is let's say that I had content I was adding, and this is true in the WordPress one too, but let's say I was going to throw down a stop note. And so, oh wait, stop note doesn't have an image. Retro card, yeah, retro card does. So I'll throw down a retro card, and retro card has these media sources, right? So I could drag and drop and upload a file there. And if I don't want to do that though, I just want to take a picture. Oh, something else has control over the camera. It's because of the screen recording. So unfortunately, I can't just do the webcam thing because Zoom has hijacked it. But if I do a different upload, some kind, we'll do this one, that my building's collapsing in the background, and we'll put up the EdTech Joker logo. There we go. So now I've got this little mouse over effect or whatever. But when I upload those, we hit save, and then we go back to media. Both of those are part of the media system. So even though you're interfacing with a type directly, even if you would drag and drop, and I wish I could show direct drag and drop. I don't actually think it works because there's a glitch in Ubuntu in my operating system level. And it's not specific to hacks. I actually had to go dig through some forums. In other setups, I can have like my file browser and I could drag and drop. Oh, let's see if it works. Oh, it did. Oh, good. That got fixed somehow. There was a glitch between Chrome and Ubuntu where you couldn't actually drag and drop things into Chrome. I don't know why. But I drag and drop that, right? It put it into this grid plate that I was working on. And just like the other interaction, because they're all stitched together, even though I just drag and drop that into the DOM, there's my new, media entity, whatever you want to call it. So that is now the latest release of Drupal 8 and 9, because it'll support both because the way Drupal is going. The WordPress project, I just got this lovely little email upon doing my updates to it. So part of getting the media integration came from actually going through the review process with the WordPress community to make sure that it's meeting security standards, that it works in multi-sites or standalone sites, things like that. So by going through that audit, I was able to just say like, well, I'm doing this already. I'll just get the media module part in place. So look for hacks to be on WordPress.org. Hopefully next week. I got to see what all's entailed there, as well as learn how to use Subversion. So that'll be fun.
Did you explain what Subversion is?
I remember using it like a decade ago.
Different version control system.
I don't think Tom was born yet.
Oh, poor
probably
Tom.
not. Yeah. So that's the WordPress Drupal land. Anybody have any questions about those? Any side of that? I'm just enhancing those integrations as we go.
That's very cool. So the Drupal 8 had APIs out of the box in core that you're hitting.
Yeah, that is hitting the JSON API. So you end up enabling the media module and then JSON API. And the only reason I was able to figure this out is someone on Edudo, it's a Drupal education Slack channel, pointed me to this JSON API Explorer, which is really powerful. You know, I love to hate on Drupal, but at the same time, I understand why people do things with it still. So this is a module you can dump in, and then it allows you to step through and construct media responses from the JSON API. So JSON API is also core in Drupal 8. You just enable JSON API. There is one thing that you have to get as far as an additional module now. And what JSON API is doing here is it lets you, I don't want media, let me go back to the root. Okay, so it lets you like explore all of the entity types in your site. So if I wanted to build something out of just users, I could then, I think this will add, no, there's no filters there. There's apparently no filters, nothing to include, field set. Well, that's weird. It's supposed to have values there. I am very confused as to why there's no values there. It must be a glitch of some kind. But I was able to actually go through and construct via a little UI here what my query was, so I could figure out the URL to hit. Because if I copy and paste this here, then we have the JSON API. And the reason that the media things all have to be separate is you can see from the JSON API response, they are segregated, which is a little weird. But then there's like video, and then I believe I have some, yeah. So the reason you need an Explorer, if you look at what these addresses are, you know, with this just like filter name condition value .jpg and filter name condition path and filter name condition operator, like it's pretty.
I remember that.
Yeah, I was not a fan. Now I did find a module that provided functionality I used to have to write into ELMS LN core, so I'm glad someone else just wrote it for me. But you could do include. And when you do an include, it brings across additional resources for you to use. So in this case, because I say include thumbnail, it normally would just point to like, hey, thumbnail is its own endpoint. And instead, it actually stitches that together as one request. So instead of having to make lots of roundabouts, you end up with one nice big object. And you can pass includes so that it on the output it only includes the very specific things that you want returned, like just the URL and just the title. I'm not going to get into that level of granularity yet. I'm just happy the stupid thing works.
Way cool, man.
So that was because, you know, I had nothing to do this week, obviously. So that was like for fun. But the fun thing I built at the beginning of the week had to do with, let me fire up Hack CMS here real quick so I can show what it is. So I wanted to, we've had some long-standing issues in Hack CMS's dashboard as we ramp up towards allowing more and more people at the university to know that this exists and is available for any of them to use by going to an address. It's going to have to be more and more easy to use and dummy proof. So based on UX testing in class, there's lots of issues I just keep going through as a backlog. One of them, there we go, admin. One of them had to do with not knowing, like this used to just say like new. And so like even minor stuff like new site, right? So the other one had to do with these fields that you were presented. So now it's site name and theme. So just some minor reorganizing of these things, wiring up some basic theme settings so that people can actually build with this. And then the other part had to do with bulk operations. So like, hey, it's not clear that you can actually act on these. So minor styling things like making these checkboxes very noticeable that they are checkboxes. Because if you're not expecting to be able to do operations in bulk, then you're not going to. So the big piece with that change was making this little visual heads up thing. So as you get lots and lots of course sites that you're working on, you're going to want some really quick, oh, that's, you know, WC Factory, or that's my blog, or that's the ODL site, right? And Hack CMS has a ton of data available to it. And then we end up visualizing it all the time. It's in a format called JSON outline schema. So JSON outline schema is just a very basic way of saying like, these are the items in this list and this is the relationship. So to see it, there's this sites list. So this is effectively JSON outline schema, is this whole items thing. So we made a very basic format for like where to get data from the items, you know, what should be included under metadata versus what is, you know, core to the item, its location. I ended up looking at a lot of specs associated with like hierarchy and the way things are related. And they always boil down to actually being physical file system related things and not URLs and not like, oh, this page is actually nested under this page. So Mike and I put together this schema a couple of, God, it's probably like 2 years ago now because we've been using this thing for a while. But we end up making more and more interesting ways to visualize it. So as I was going to go to build this, I was like, well, I think as we showed previously, Chuck and Mike had made these nice things called like course cards. And so this is actually, what is it? OER.courses.science, there it is. So that card is actually this card, but with the additional style capabilities that I added into it. So last week I showed taking this course card, abstracting it, digging into it a bit. So I remixed it even further to support color touches and to you know, support certain properties not being activated. But in the process of doing that, I was like, I'm gonna have to visualize JSON schema data. So instead of hard coding this into the page, I made an element that can visualize JSON schema data. And so it's a little weird, so I would love some feedback on it for sure. But it looks like that. It's called JOS render. Oops, let's just open this in a code editor, shall we? The whole repo. Do I have, oh, I have it open in the wrong window. I'm an idiot. So there it is, and then I will fire up, hopefully this will launch. There we go, okay. So we'll just work on this item specifically. So, and this is a test bed, right? So it's obviously why these things look different sizes and are goofy, because I cleaned it up for the other place. But what JOS render does, if you look at listing, is the way that you can end up implementing it is you have, in this case, I have JOS render, right, as I'm creating a new tag, and then you pass it a source, or you can just pass it items. So you can either point to a JSON file, or you can just say, hey, this is where your items are located. And this is going to load, in this case, sitelist.json, which is in JSON outline schema format. So this is that same file I showed before. It's going to load that file in, and then it's going to run through, I don't know how to describe this other than magic. So this is a approach that I discovered while I was making hacks. So there's a lot of, it's a heavy lift to say, hey, you're searching YouTube in the page. I'm going to present those results. Hey, you're searching NASA in the page. I'm going to present those results. Hey, you're searching Drupal, WordPress, whatever, without constantly making like a WordPress data visual tag or a Drupal visual tag. Instead, I came up with this like mapping technique. And so the way the map works is things on the left are the actual property inside of the web component. And things on the right are the property, or sorry, the attribute key inside of the data coming across. And so what you end up being able to do is I can basically wire this data source into anything visually. So to prove it, I can, let's just take out all of this. And so we can see here, this is going to put a course card on the page. It's actually going to then dynamically import its definition using some of the other stuff we've showed. Then it's going to say, hey, set the dark property to true on the course card. And then the name is going to equal whatever the title coming across in our site list is. And so what you end up getting is this, right? So it doesn't have that extra data mixed into it. Now, if I take off the dark flag, hit save, right? This is what they would look like. These are colorless, but they have the title there. If I was to write something in the name that isn't actually in the data coming across, like Michael Potter, and hit save, it'll detect that that's not a valid selection in the data coming and go, oh, you probably just mean a string. So you can set things in here, right? There's nothing dark, or I could make dark be the status. There might be a status, I'm not sure. Oh, status does come across and all those sites are published. Now, the other fun thing that I added into this is the ability to do on-the-fly transforms. So we're already down the rabbit hole, so we're gonna keep going further. You get data coming across an API, we'll say it's YouTube, and you go, God, couldn't they just send me false if they don't have it listed? But you're not gonna influence YouTube's API, and you don't wanna make that YouTube API integration hyphen blah, blah, blah tag. So there's 3 ways that we can map these. There's direct property access. There's just saying, hey, make it the value that I said because it doesn't match a property. And then there's these transforms. And this is brand new that as far as me doing these type of integrations. So if it detects that it's mapping a property to an object, and that object has transform and a value, it is going to take the value off the API, pass it into the transform, and then use the response in the output. If that made sense to anyone, please let me know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it also, in the case, here we see with item, and I'm not actually leveraging item in this one, it's going to give you additional data. So this is going to say, hey, to form the URL, I need you to do a complex transform. Give me location as a value, but then also give me access to the entire item that I'm operating on. Because URL might be some sophisticated mashup of multiple values. So it's more important that when I form URL, that I know what the whole item coming across the API is. So if I hit save now, we get our nice, happy, these all link to the right place. If I said, let's do item, we'll do console.log item, and we'll inspect here. You'll see we actually have a data type called JSON outline schema item. And then within that item, I have access to that whole piece of data coming across at that exact point in time. Whatever I return becomes the value of URL. So if I wanted this to be, you know, instead return item.title, because that one is called hacks.camp. Now, when I hover over these, it might be a little smaller, but it says demo/task recommendation or demo/hacks.camp, right? If I made this say, whoops, a string, and we did HTTPS, right? And then for hacks.camp, now I have hacks.camp in that space. So I can visualize this data, this JSON outline schema data, however I want, and I can map it to anything from the API coming across. I could probably abstract it further and just make it handle anything. In fact, it basically already does. There's like literally nothing specific to JSON outline schema.
I kind of want to change how conversions work now within the within simple fields.
What to do this transform methodology?
Yeah, as opposed to what I was doing. But I don't want to go back to that too soon because I just got done with that. But that's I love it. I could see that being used in so many ways.
So I don't actually try to see.
Be great for theming.
There's very little that actually is doing that's related to JSON. I mean, I just have it in JSON outline schema because I was doing it, but like it can transform anything into anything.
So here's the
structured data.
Here's the thing, like, wouldn't it be cool if you did have a site that had data, if you had a GUI where someone could configure the mapping when they create something?
Mm-hmm.
That
and
would
say like, this is how I want to visualize this data.
Yeah.
See, now you're trying to give me these good idea.
Are you going to put a ticket in for you, or is that somehow going to fall on me?
I'm going to have to put it in for me now. So,
Yeah, because I could
this is just going
definitely.
in the idea bin. Visualize
I mean,
anything via
it's-
UI.
It's kind of like a Drupal view, right? Like you could set up your own, or like you're basically setting up your own view of repeatable items.
Yeah, and I think like for some of Collins's use cases associated with like his student projects and things, he's always saying like, just give me, I have this data
I
as
actually need this
JSON.
for Studio. Oh, I just scared my cat with my over emphatic hand slapping. No, like honestly, I will need this because because Collins and I were talking about that. And if that gets you excited about Studio, then
Gets me
even better.
excited about visualizing data in different ways and mashing it together. That'd be fine.
This could make stuff happen, and we have the perfect use case, and can justify that we're working on stuff that impacts our work, like our legit work that is high priority for our leadership.
Something like that, or data WC viz or so. These types of things are so abstract. I don't even know what to call that. Like we sort of have a capability like this in Hack CMS, but this is more abstract than that one. That one is very specific to like, take the items and print them.
Yeah, I like it because then that puts more power. That takes it even out of the hands of somebody who does theming with HTML and CSS. Now we're getting into those GUI based setups.
And the key mapping thing really isn't that complicated. So it walks through the map. It says, hey, make sure it's not a Boolean or null because those can cause issues downstream. So just set that out right. Then look for a transform. If it has a transform and a value, there's something I made in pursuit of hacks, actually for this exact functionality, which is a wrapper function called var get and var exists. And those are exported from utils. So we have LRM Web Components utils and also wipe slot. So all three of these are totally knockoffs of the reason I made them for hacks. So when this thing goes to render, it wipes out the element itself, creates a tag, right? So that's where the map tag is to say, where the heck was my demo listing? That's this part, right? So I'm in this object to say, hey, render as a course card. And then tests if it's Boolean, sees if it has that, and then var exists is the equivalent of doing, right? So you have structured data coming in, and it might look like this. It might be like cool stuff things, and that things might equal true. Now it's very difficult without writing lots of JavaScript to figure out if things is set. Just natural, like do it in a lazy way without doing constant like value.transform, value.transform, and value.transform.cool.stuff.things. Oh, that all of those exist? Yay, we won't throw a JavaScript error. So what var exists does is you would actually pass it in this item, and then you would pass it in cool.stuff.things. And it does that check at each of the dot breaks. So it leverages that notation to basically verify cool exists and then stuff and then things all the way down. Similar to varget. Varget will do that same thing. And then what varget additionally adds to it is support for another parameter, which would be, well, if that value missed, then just give me stuff as a default. And so leveraging that, right, I would know that that exists in the map, run the transform function, pass in the value and the item in question, and then sets it to the property, which is the key here.
I wonder if you could just do instead of setting a transform function and a value property, I wonder if you could just check if it's a function. Because if it's a function, then you know that it's going to be a transform because there's nothing else it could possibly be. And you could just send that function the item. And
True. Yeah. Yeah, that would make it even easier, actually. You're right. Put that in the thing. Because I enjoy completely gutting the way this operates now as opposed to later when it's implemented places. It's only implemented in one place. So check if it's a function, then pass the whole item. Yeah, and then I don't need the path detection. That actually becomes much easier. Nice.
Right.
Then, and this is annoying, but then I have to do a, well, if the value is a string and it exists, then get the value. Otherwise, just try and set it to the value as a hard-coded value. It's annoying you have to do all 4 checks.
I really like having that magic like fallback checking. That just improves the developer experience a lot. By saying like if the property doesn't exist, you can just set it to a string. You know, like the user doesn't have to specifically say, hey, this is not a property, this is a string. Like you're just trying to figure it out for them. It's nice.
Yeah. So then the way that this looks in Hack CMS in the listing page, core CD site list, oops, CD site listing, or not type right, is list. Come on. Oh my gosh. There. Stupid click. Okay. So it brings in, where are you? JOS render. There we go. JOS render. Oh, this was also another just small thing that I liked is, so I set active and hover state on the card, and then I remove grayscale so that way it looks grayed out and like washed out colors using simple colors. And then as you activate it, it fades it in. And so that's how I'm able to do the, in this, like they look washed out, and then as you go over them, they get like neonized almost. I just thought that was a weird, I've never actually done that. I've never done a CSS grayscale before. So then in JOS render, this one I just have thrown into the slot. I believe then I do a selector. Yep. So whenever the site data changes, which is what's going on in this, then it takes those items off of the response and just sets items directly, which then the JOS render tag is going to pick up and deal with the rest. Because it already has a map. So the map for this one is a lot more complicated, right? So I'm going to have to update this. But it's even able to deal with stuff like this, right? Where, hey, what's the data coming across? Well, it's a file. The backend is going to say the image is whatever the image has been set by the user. Well, if the user doesn't set an image, I don't want to mangle the data and set an image. They didn't set an image. But in this visualization of the data, I do want there to be a banner of some kind. And so in this case, I'm able to say, oh, well, hey, when you're building image, do that transform, take the logo. If it doesn't have a logo, then return banner. Or as a thing that was really annoying in this, if I had an image and I set it source with spaces, it didn't actually load. I've never had that happen before. But the image, there was an image that had spaces in it because it's just whatever the user set. And so visualizing it as an IMG tag and it being generated dynamically, if it had a space in the name, it wouldn't render. So even something as simple as that, right? Transforming the API on the fly and returning a valid location to get to the image. Also in this case, the logo is down inside of the site in question, right? That logo image path is relative to the site. And so I can generate it to whatever I want in this case. So that's all I got on that one. I thought it would generate some interesting aha maybes. And then I'll definitely refactor that. We'll want to come up with what the name is of that. I don't know what to call that, Nikki. But we could totally, I could totally see us using that in the studio, because you're going to want to take student work remix it to be visualized one way on one interface, remix it for a second one. And what Mike and I ended up building with the original studio is why pieces of it are clunky, is because we didn't have a capability like that in mind. And so we ended up making like a latest posts block that visualizes things, and then latest comments block that visualizes things sort of similar but different because it came from a different data source. And then we had to remake the tags again. Like, so we end up with these really similar ways of presenting very similar information, but yet, granted, we cranked most of that out in 2 weeks. So we're just trying to get it done. But